Good afternoon to Authentic Engagement from Programs to Partnerships on Wednesday, December 2015. Please continue to type in the chat box. It is very exciting to see where you are calling from today. Today's webinar is a presentation of ALA's Public Programs Office, part of Latino Americans, 500 Years of History, a programming initiative in partnership with the National Endowment for the Humanities. Please refer to the website www.ala.org/LatinoAmericans for more information. We are in Adobe's virtual welcome. Kindly download today's slides and related materials in the Related Materials pod. Again, the session is being recorded and will after this date, again at ala.org/LatinoAmericans. If you have any questions regarding tech news for today's webinar, you can hover over Samantha Oakley's name and send her a private message. Thank you, everyone, for being in. It's so exciting to see so many parts of the country represented here today. And I am Nada, your facilitator. I take this moment to warn that I am available to talk with you or any member of your team at any time. Initiative. Questions may be as straightforward as how do I talk to a local newspaper programming to how can I best describe my projects and outcomes for the final report. Today's presenters are Kathleen Benson and Juana Guzman, whose titles you will see on the screen and whose extents are available in the attachment. Today's webinar is designed to give Latino American grantees and their scholars and partners a chance to hear speakers from the arts and culture sector. Kathleen Benson and Juana Guzman will share highlights from their 20-plus years in the field, their best practices with community engagement. Their work has been transformative, not only for the institution, but for their community partners, the citywide partnerships they more importantly, the people they served. How they've done this work is a testament about their commitment to community and who they are as cultural workers dedicated to public service. Personally, I have long admired Kath professionally, and I am delighted that they are here with us today to share their deep passion and knowledge too. I will formally introduce Kathy in just a few seconds. Introduce Juana at the conclusion of Kathy's presentation. Just a quick note that we have heard from both of our guests. Please remember that we may stay on the call for a cue to their presentations if you wish. Now to formally introduce our first guest speaker, Kathleen Benson. Working at the Museum of the City of New York and believing that a museum must be a place visitors can find themselves, Kathleen coordinated a series of exhibitions with East organizations. As a result of these partnerships, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter chose the museum as its partner in developing its 35th anniversary exhibition, El Barrio, Puerto Rican. Kathy's work promoting East Harlem, El Barrio, continued and continues to this day. Forms of board service, walking tour development, and support for its cultural, civic, and housing organizations. I am to share with you and introduce you to Kathy Benson, someone who is dearly revered. Kathy, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Nita. We will be presentation photograph of the Museum of the City of New York, where I spent my entire working life. It was founded in 1923, great and interpret educating the public about its distinctive character, especially its heritage of diversity, opportunity, and perpetuation. The founders of the City Museum chose to locate it in East Harlem in order to be close to the newest New York. Back then, East Harlem had sizable Italian and Jewish enclaves, pockets of Irish, Greeks, and Finns, and a long American community. Since World War II, East Harlem has cradled large Latino communities. Puerto Ricans first, over the last 20 years or so, Dominicans, Colombians, and increasingly Mexicans. In the 1970s, the museum presented an exhibition entitled East Harlem, which featured the work of local artists, primarily Puerto Rican and African American. In this photo, the museum then, Joseph Beach Noble, is shown at the entrance to the exhibition with Betty Mango and Yvonne Villain of the Community Relations Department. I show this photo from the opening reception for the exhibition because it contains the one model in the exhibition of the fabled La Marqueta, a once-thriving market under what is now the Metro North Railroad Viaduct. In its heyday, La Marqueta was for Latinos to buy traditional foods as well as traditional medicines and recordings of Latin music. The artist who created the model, Dennis Urrutia, donated it to the museum after the exhibition closed. I was a member of the museum's education department at that time, but had nothing to do with the realization of the East Harlem exhibition. My first involvement with East Harlem occurred in 1988 when Maria Dominguez, then director of education at El Museo del Barrio, across the street from my museum, invited the City Museum to participate in the 20th annual Three Kings. I was so honored that we were asked. For years afterward, a contingent from the City Museum, a giant Manhattan puppet. Over the years, the two museums have often collaborated on programs, most notably on a series of summer Saturday block parties called Miracles on 104th Street, and the past two Wednesday evening Uptown Bounce dance parties on their respective front terraces. My significant involvement with East Harlem came in the early 1990s, after the museum inaugurated the New York City Community Gallery. Its mission was to present exhibitions and collaboration with small audiences and to attract everyone was the part. I organized my first exhibition in the Community Gallery in collaboration with a woman who took the same bus route to where I did. With the community and just street. Her project show elderly Latino residents in East Harlem photographs of other elderly Latinos and to ask what came to them when they looked at the photographs. This was her way of eliciting their thoughts about their own circumstances, about aging, the changes in East Harlem, and the future. Judy and I thought it would make an interesting exercise. Conversations led to Growing Old in Spanish Harlem, 1992, in the Community Gallery. This 1993 was when it was up. This multimedia and bilingual exhibition investigated the lives and attitudes of Puerto Rican and Cuban nationals who had migrated to New York in the 90s. This is a scan of the postcard, front and back. Showing author Ernesto Quiñones, Judy Friedenberg, poet Susana Motos, an unidentified friend of Judy's, at one of the public programs related to the exhibition. Of older East Harlem residents because of this project, including Petra Allende, a longtime community. through Petra, I believe, I came into the orbit of the Settlement Association, a social services organization founded in East Harlem in 1890. In 1995, I organized my second community gallery exhibition, Union Settlement: 100 Years of Leadership in East Harlem. And the following year, I worked with Union Settlement Association on a generational photography project to show youth and elders historic photographs of East Harlem to document the same or similar sites in 1996. These photographs were the topic of the third community gallery exhibition, East Harlem, Old and Young. This is a photo of the Spiral Mountain Project with a slightly different title. I came to understand how important it is for people to be able to find themselves in museums. I worked with other neighborhoods and groups to create exhibition stories, among them A Community of Many Worlds, Arab Americans in New York City in 2002, Global New York's Inwood in 2004, Harlem Lost and Found, also 2004, Black Style Now, 2006, and Samurai in New York, the first Japanese delegation in 2008, was a constant for me. In 1995, the Union Settlement Association and others started an East Harlem historical organization, which I joined early on. Primary activities were public programs hosted at the City Museum. Such programs as the Young Lord Harlem, Growing Up in East Harlem, and East Harlem Writers were offered free of charge in standing room only audiences of present and former neighborhood residents. We set aside lots of participation, and we learned a great deal from the testimonials of audience members. In 1998, working with an organization called Place Matters and under the auspices of the City Museum, the historical organization published a map of East Harlem containing a wealth of historical information. The map went into a second printing in 1999, and in 2006 we published an edition with new photos and streamlined text. This is a panel from the second edition. The City Museum and El Museo del Barrio gave them to visitors, and we distributed the maps around the neighborhood, gave them out at public programs and walking tours. Being part of the East Harlem Historical Archive inspired me to delve deeper into the neighborhood's history. There is no better way to learn about a neighborhood than to walk it. Neighborhood residents started to recognize me and tell me stories about various sites. In retrospect, I realized how important it was to be present and on the ground in the neighborhood. In 1996, I suggested the City Museum partner with a well-regarded tour organization and worked with Big to develop a multi-ethnic East Harlem tour, which Big Onion tour guides conducted under the museum for several years. Around 2004, I developed a walking tour called The Hut in East Harlem, which I conducted annually as part of the museum's public programming. We visited to Metropolis Studios, a fully digitized recording studio, St. Cecilia's Church, which was built by Irish immigrants and now serves a largely African-American, Puerto Rican, and Mexican, and the Julio de Burgos Latino Cultural Center, which occupies a former public school building for the renowned Puerto Rican poet. The City Museum's community exhibitions and my outreach to the East Harlem community led Felix Matos Rodriguez, then Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, aka Centro, to approach the museum in 2003 about presenting an exhibition to celebrate Centro's 35th anniversary. I was to organize that exhibition. This is a scan from a slide, the El Barrio Puerto Rican New York band on the left. El Barrio Puerto Rican View from January to June 2005. It explored the neighborhood called El Barrio as an Puerto Rican identity and as an emotional touchstone for more than 800,000 New Yorkers of Puerto Rican heritage, as well as a significant proportion of the millions in the continental United States. This is a scan of the exhibition postcard, front and back. by Hiram Maristani and shows East 111th Street in 1968. Born in Barrio, Maristani has been photographing his neighborhood for more than 45 years. He was a founder of the Young Lords and the party's official photographer. He documented the founding of El Museo del Barrio, of Taller, an artist collective, in just about every aspect of the neighborhood. And his photographs had not been exhibited in 20 years, since the Caribbean Cultural Center's exhibition on the Young Lords Party in 1983. And here's a scan of the front of the exhibition gallery guide, which was in English and Spanish, and which contained thumbnail images of a couple dozen of Hiram's photos. The historical section, essentially a timeline of Puerto Rican migration to New York, was drawn primarily from sensitive archives and included a wall of photographs and a database of migrants from the Identification and Documentation Program sponsored by the Office of the Governor of Puerto Rico in the United States. This installation shot shows the exhibition title panel. The Puerto Rican-born Warren Antonio James drew his inspiration from Julia de Burgos's poem De la Loíza. Also, the blue he chose is the original blue of the Puerto Rican flag. This shot also shows the La Marqueta model by Dennis Urrutia that was in the 1973 exhibition. I was delighted to include it in the El Barrio exhibition. I'm in connection with the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. In 2007, I was the only non-Latino member of the new associate director for the Center's Library and Archives. I have conducted research in the archive and regularly attend openings of the Center's exhibitions, especially now that the Center has moved to a new Hunter in East Harlem. The collaboration with the Centro and the El Barrio exhibition also helped me to gain acceptance in East Harlem. As back as 1996, the museum had recognized my efforts at outreach to East Harlem and other communities and had given me titles that had community in them. That changed in 2009 when the Great Recession necessitated layoffs. I was asked to step in to fill a void in exhibition and publication project management. Now, activities in East that I had often accomplished on museum time were no longer part of my job description. I love outreach, and so I continued those activities on my own. Pretty soon I was overcommitted. Eventually, I retired from my salaried job and was able to work for free for my various small nonprofits in East Harlem. Although I had retired, I was serving as a consultant on the City Museum's Activist New York exhibition. I developed and conducted an activist East Harlem walking tour in connection with that exhibition, which was in early May 2012. This photo was taken in Graffiti Hall of Fame on Park Avenue and 106th Street. The East Harlem Historian had ceased operations around 2005, though its essential mission went on in a new organization, East Harlem Preservation. I was an early board member and still serve on the board currently as secretary. This photo is from a fundraiser we held on November 5th of this year in celebration of our 10th anniversary and also the successful completion of a project to revision a local mural tribute to prisoner Oscar Lopez Rivera, who's been in federal prison for 34 years on charges of seditious conspiracy. There is an active movement at President Obama to pardon him. This is of Zen Medina, whose artist collective painted both the original and the revision mural, and Marina, and president of East Harlem Preservation, with Marina's photo of the mural. In addition to my work with East Harlem Preservation, I am on the board of Hope Community, a housing organization, I confess interested in its tradition of supporting community murals and other artworks on its properties than I knew shy of asset management and tax credits and such. I am also on the East Harlem Holiday Committee, which provides the neighborhood with a 30-foot tall holiday tree each year. The fundraising for the 12th annual East Harlem Holiday Tree. This photo is of the holiday tree in 2011. Community Board 11, which serves the district of East Harlem, has given financial support to the holiday tree for a number of years. There are 50 of these local representative bodies in New York City, and each consists of up to 50 unsalaried members, monthly at full board meetings and also monthly as part of various committees. A couple of years ago, me that I should not just appear before the community board when I sought support for the holiday tree, so regularly attending the monthly board meetings. One can learn a lot at these meetings. Pretty soon I started asking why I was there. I responded that I thought it was only polite to do so regularly and not asking for money. Most understood that answer. One board member, who was also a friend, said, "Oh, then it's a strategic decision." I had to think about that. I guess it is, though that was not my original intention. I just thought it was the polite thing to do. This year, in addition to the 12th annual East Harlem Holiday Tree, I've been exceptionally busy with East Harlem preservation work. The Historic Districts Council selected East Harlem as one of the neighborhoods in its Six to Celebrate initiative for 2015. The HDC helped support the costs of the revisioning of the free Oscar Lopez Rivera mural. Under the auspices of East Harlem Preservation and HDC, I have conducted several lost and found murals of East Harlem tours. This photo was taken in front of a mural designed by the artist Maria Dominguez, who was the director of education at El Museo del Barrio in 1988, and who was the one who invited the City Museum to march in the 20th Three Kings Day Parade. Most recently, in connection with the Hunter East Harlem Gallery exhibition, If You Leave Me, Can I Come Too? And under the auspices of East Harlem Preservation, I developed 2 Death and Life in East Harlem walking tours in 2 different sections of the neighborhood. Sites visited include RIP, that's Rest in Peace murals, historic funeral homes, botanicas, tattoo parlors, commemorative street signs, ghost bikes, and more. This is the postcard for the second tour. I still love to develop and conduct walking tours in East Harlem, and almost every time I give a walking tour or walk around the neighborhood as I plan a new one, I encounter people I know and people I don't know who offer new information or memories. I enjoy this on-the-ground give and take with community residents. East Harlem Preservation is part of a new coalition called Landmark East Harlem, the mission of which is to achieve landmark status for buildings and murals and historic district status for areas of great historic importance in the neighborhood that will be at risk once the planned rezoning of the district occurs. Only as part of an organization with which I am affiliated, such as East Harlem Preservation or Hope Community, do I take a stand on political issues. Actually, I try only to take a stand on issues that unite East Harlem, not on those that divide it. Naturally, there are interethnic tensions. I stay clear of them. I feel comfortable and largely accepted in East Harlem, but there is a line that I do not cross, and that is to assume that I may speak as an East Harlemite. I listen and I learn. I will voice my opinions to my East Harlem friends, but I do not publicly take sides because it's not my place to do so.
Thank you, Kathy, and I can say from experience that we in East Harlem have adopted you wholeheartedly. You are truly a treasure. You can see attendees, Kathy's trajectory and arc happened rather but I think it's a testament to commitment, consistency is present. Um, and I will now be delighted to introduce Juana, who is from my original hometown, my beloved Chicago, Illinois. And I wanted to know who this woman was. And she is here with you today. I'm just excited. Juana is a champion for the promotion of arts, culture, and heritage as a catalyst for social change and a community's economic development. Juana is a national expert in this arena, and her talk will offer key learnings from her career, which include tenure as former vice president of the National Museum of Mexican Arts in Chicago. She was also an executive at the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs, where she led a multicultural effort that created awareness and enhanced opportunities for Chicago's diverse neighborhoods. She was also part of Ford Foundation's Shifting Sands Initiative, a project to frame arts and cultural organizations as vital community agents. I welcome Juana Guzman. Thank you, Juana, for being here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and to all of you for the ability to be able to share the story of my life and why I think it's important that we strengthen the capacity of our communities and to preserve their cultural identity, to create safe spaces in which they can come together, and the cooperation and partnerships within these communities and externally with governmental and other funding sources that can help strengthen what communities want to do in their neighborhoods. And this concept really came from fresh out of art school, and I had accepted a position side where it was facing it's the south side and east side Chicago, where steel mills were being shut down, and so I was working with ADA as a social service organization, and they brought someone like me to try to figure out how they can mobilize, especially in lieu of the fact that people were losing their jobs and their homes, and really just quite devastated and didn't know what the future was looking for them. And being, just so young, understanding, how the impact of what was happening in the community, I took to I knew best, which was the arts. And so I used the arts to bring people together, so to have conversations about what was going on with their neighborhood, how they can work together to issues of displacement and racial inequities and the lack of jobs. And I did that successfully with faith-based groups and community development corporations and libraries and the educational system and other social service groups and the residents, with some very successful projects. And this was really the beginning of making me realize the importance of finding ways to mobilize communities and draw attention to their what was happening in the city of Chicago's neighborhoods. And the neighborhood I was working with was specifically Mexican, African American, and white Polish community, by virtue of the fact that they together because of the steel mills. That's what brought everybody together. It crossed all the racial divides there because of the mills. But once that was gone, all the racial tensions continued and got worse. But bringing these artistic programs and bringing people who could talk about color and how a place like the neighborhood house could be a place to come together and celebrate who they were and mirror them was a very important step. It really created a wonderful place for them to have conversations and some really tough issues. And so that was, to me, the foundation I wanted to continue to do and find ways to do that. And eventually that led me to the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs at the time, where I spent 18 years of life. And initially I accepted a position that provided grants to individual artists and nonprofit arts organizations. But that was a very important because I became familiar with the city. I became familiar with Chicago's 81 its diversity, its issues, and what the artists and arts organizations were looking for, and what they were doing to contribute to the economy, to the culture, to the preservation, and to the of their neighborhoods. And so I decided, with partnerships with several communities in the city, which was a very comprehensive collaboration between these neighborhoods, their local restaurants, their local community historians, cultural facilities, educational facilities, and libraries, to come together to develop that would provide visitors within the city of Chicago and outside kind of a look at the rich cultural nuances of Chicago's neighborhoods, because not being promoted. So much of Chicago was being promoted from a downtown corridor, a very mainstream perspective. I felt that Chicago, being cities in this country, really needed to tell its story much more deeply, and that's once I created the tour program. I started out with one neighborhood at a time. I started with the Pills, specifically a Mexican community that was very about 15 minutes away from Chicago, and began to work with the National Museum of Mexican Art, which at the time Mexican Fine Arts Center Museum, and we began to put together a program, insight to the culture, people's identity from a first voice perspective. As written, every script, all the guides, everyone, it was based on true partnership. All the language that was written was with them as a committee. Nothing went out without their okaying it. And so that was very important to make towards the authenticity of the story. What I didn't want was to create these, and I didn't create the tours to create a tourism program. I responded to the community cultures in Chicago's neighborhoods in their concern of feeling neglected, that the city was not promoting. And I thought that this was a way of promoting the programmatic and institutional contributions of these cultural institutions, and also of the neighborhoods like Pilsen, with its vibrant district, with one of the strongest artist community base, with one of the most powerful social services and partners there. Bringing together was not only to bring visitors there, but to mobilize the community and help them see a different kind of way. And through the course of this, many independent things took place of the creation of this tour. People began to question why their intention wasn't being drawn. Why did they not have a local library within their community? Why did not have housing? Why were not the economic opportunities being focused on Pilsen, considering it was generating this tax from many of the businesses and restaurants that were in the Pilsen community? They had a demand. They had a right to demand for a percentage of that tax dollars that they had to be reinvested in their communities. These were the conversations that were taking across the board, all these entities with the political representation there, and it really began to change the way themselves. And then eventually this program shifted to 25 others, and I wanted to see if this could occur on a national level. I began to receive calls from other communities, like in Houston, from the Greater Tourism Convention Bureau, that wanted to do something similar. There was a tour that was developed specifically to profile the African American community in the 10th Ward community, as well as the Vietnamese, and then this collaborator brought attention to those wards in Houston that again felt was not capturing the local economy and the visibility that they felt they deserved. And eventually I was able to take this on an international level, where I was invited by Mayor Malava, who felt that the quality culture was being, again, overlooked in Durban, South Africa, that so much industry and the cultural promotion was being managed by Europeans and not people that lived and worked there. He wanted to find a way in which people promoted themselves, controlled the industry, and also to find other ways to link, to create economic opportunity for the artists and the people who lived in Durban, South Africa, and the surrounding Zulu-Natal region. And this became a very successful project there. It really just went back how communities really want to have their own places that reflect our, and I'm proud that I was able to be part of a conversation and effort by mobilizing people in that effort. In addition, I was able to persuade the Empowerment Zone Enterprise Dollars. It was one of the first initiatives that came to Chicago from an initiative that was presented by President Clinton, and New York City was one of the recipients of the Empowerment Zone, and as well as other states. But nowhere in the language of the Empowerment Zone funding did they include revitalization through arts and culture. And so with the partnership that I had established program and other initiatives while I was at Cultural Affairs, I was able to mobilize my community, my committee partners around the issue of including arts and culture in the Empowerment Zone. The Empowerment Zone in Chicago was the first of its kind in the guidelines include money to create cultural anchors and facilities that within their neighborhoods. And so $8.1 million was designated out of $100 million for that purpose, and that was unheard of across the country. Other states like New York City and others began to look into that as well. But I was one of the first to initiate that, and those monies really went back to the neighborhoods so that places like Mexican art, which received a portion of those dollars, was to create and expand their existing facility into a state-of-the-art museum, as well as other cultural in Chicago, such as Little Black Pearl in Brownsville, where they received $1 million. It was the first time to receive that kind of money, and to be able to even consider the creation or expansion of facilities. And so that was a very important step. Eventually after that, I accepted the vice president of the National Museum of Mexican Art. There they were at a trend. They had received, they had raised about $9 million to create, expand on their cultural facility from 15,000 square feet 8,000 square feet. The National Museum of Mexican Art, which was once the Mexican Fine Arts Center, one of the first accredited museums in the country, Latino accredited museums. So that's pretty significant, because anybody who understands what it takes to create a museum and to be the American Museum Association will know that there's a lot of requirements, from control to collections and exhibition spaces and all that. This that they raised allowed the museum that is anchored in the Pilsen community, which was once historically a Eastern European neighborhood that was there because of the low manufacturing, canal work, world, began to transition as Mexicanos began to move into the community. And so this was an important space, not only for the Pilsen community, but also for the entire city of Chicago. Chicago has a very large Mexican community, not only in Pilsen, but as well. So this was a very important place, because very few museums, cultural institutions really reflected or even promoted the Mexican art, or any art, quite honestly, of color in the city of Chicago, unless it was some kind of special show that came internationally. But for the most part, it was the art scene in Chicago was very neglectful of the African community, Mexicano community, and other cultural groups that were there. This is why the creation of this museum important. And I would have the opportunity to be there and be part of that expansion and create an important anchor with exhibition spaces, a very large collection with the appropriate staff. And we went through a major transition in stabilizing and building the of the institution. This museum and developing strategies not only was first and foremost an important place for the residents, that it was a place for them that was free and it was theirs. It also created a very strong anchor with all the local libraries, the local school systems there that began to visit this facility, being in over 150, 180,000 people to the museum, coming from all Chicago and throughout the Midwest and also nationally. And so then that brought in a viable and money to the local restaurants and promoting local artists and strengthening the museum. Was not only an important space for the community to come together where they could see works of art that reflected who they were, but they were also a good neighbor. And what I mean by a good neighbor is they worked very closely with community development corporations, schools, they worked with libraries, they worked with other entities to talk about what was important to the community about the arts, but it was about how arts can address many of the social inequities, the issues that were impacting of displacement in this community. And so they demonstrated the importance of this collaboration that really brought this community to the importance of this cultural facility, but also the fact that the museum was there when place in streetscaping or facade development or murals. And so this is a cultural facility like the museum can play in a community like Pilsen. So it has, obviously, it was very important to the community to have its own cultural identity, its motif of the bordering of the building. It gave a great sense of pride. And also the fact that it was able to promote the local artists, but promote artists on a national and international level. Partnership with Mexico, with many of the museums in Mexico, and bringing those exhibits to Chicago. And one of the big blockbusters was the Frida Kahlo show, in thousands and thousands of people, also drawing really just thousands of dollars to the museum. So it was an important economic entity for this community museum. And then the idea of identity, cultural preservation, see themselves. And in working on this project, I had an opportunity to work in collaboration, not only with the curatorial staff at the museum, but with many partners around the city, our neighboring neighborhoods were African American communities, with faith-based groups, with African American representatives who were scholars, who came together in a committee to decide how this show was presented. It was an important way to educate people in how they see themselves, first as Mexicanos, understand that they also had African roots within their blood, because in consider the African presence in Mexico the third root, the indigenous, the Spanish, and the Africans are the enslaved people. And so there was an education in Mexico and about in Mexico and also within the United States, and also the relationship we had with the African American in the United States, like Langston Hughes and Elizabeth Catlett. And so it was a great collaborative educational level. This show went across the country. We developed a replication of the show, that this show could travel to various libraries throughout the city of Chicago. Really, really important in helping us promote the issues of identity and bridging bridges among the bordering neighborhoods of Pilsen, also between the Mexican community and the African American community, that we shared this commonality and so libraries would present this traveling show in their libraries, and we would have someone there about what the exhibit was about and our commonalities, and within the African American and throughout the city and other neighborhood groups, and this throughout the United States. And so it was more than just an exhibit. It was about talking. It was about collaboration. It was about cultural identity. So that those exhibits, like the Day of the Dead, that preserves the identity and celebrates Juarez Mexicanos, like the Day of the Dead, that celebrates those who have passed, our loved ones, our friends. Something that mobilizes the community, that comes into a museum, that allows to celebrate what the community is about, to educate the community on their cultural heritage, and also draw support of the community to the cultural institution so that they feel that this is their place. And so the facility was more than just an exhibition space. It was served for the community to come together, for non-arts groups to come together, to use this to really have conversations in a safe space where people could come together. Corporations would come together to have their events. Other cultural groups that were not Latino do collaborations with the museum, use the space. So it truly did traditions. It was very inclusive. It allowed people to and really just bridge understanding and collaboration, which and what these cultural anchors, and also public space like the park, because the national public land, that public space can also be used in a way to articulate the identity of the community. It is really important to find the fit between community, the arts, and humanities to strengthen the that are within and their relationship in their community, to promote the cultural knowledge, to encourage culture and sensitivity, and also to foster partnerships not just only within the community, but also nationally, because there's a lot of things that we can share and create that who we are and what we do, and the importance of our communities and what that means. Provide these safe anchors for children and for their families, and that you're nurturing the city that comes out of church basements and cultural centers and schools, that's not born or museums, but that really comes comes from these neighborhoods. And what do we lose when we don't in these communities and these cultural anchors and the people that live and work there? What do we lose in terms of the activity and the contributions that they make to the society? How do we use this to strengthen themselves and bring a vitality of economic development and revitalization? And those are the things we look at. And partnerships, as I talked about, in the case for the museum and China, a project between two boarding communities with a transit bus with the Chicago Transit Authority, visitors from the museum campus of downtown to Chinatown and Pilsen, in order to create and the audiences, in order to bring in new audiences to the community so that they can spend their dollars there, so that they can artwork, so they can support these communities, and so one of several goals. And so these things that are really important to communities, and having like cultural archways like this one in Little Village that distinctively mark the community as you go under. This was important for the commercial corridor. The businessmen there wanted something fine in Chinatown, and to really distinguish it apart from others. And that's what community wants. Communities want to be distinguished. They want to brand themselves, and they want to bring certain vitality to their communities, and they want to empower themselves. They want to control their own identity. And so the cultural inclusion and civic involvement is really critical. As I said, in this whole cross-cultural awareness, to create safe spaces, opportunities for the people that live and work there, to create partnerships with people who make art entities, and the advantages of working with schools and libraries and community development operations in partnership and not in isolation. And so with that, I continue to focus on that work on a national level, and I am very grateful to take the dream that started out as a young person on the South Side in the steel mills, and to be able to continue this work with so many groups, not only in Chicago, but across the country. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Juana. Thank you, Juana, Kathy, and attendees. I hope that you have questions. What you will glean is that Kathy, Juana, and I share a culturally specific and neighborhood-specific museum background, that we leveraged our arts and programs and partnerships to become authentic members of our community. And I do feel strongly, and I know I've shared with you, that libraries, because of technology and other disruptions, are also at a critical juncture where they're being used differently and are being envisioned and are becoming creative, safe spaces where music and readings and community celebrations come alive. Our institutions are no longer kind of like churches or synagogues where we kind of just sit quietly. We breathe life into them now. I am wondering, attendees, does anyone have a burning question, or shall I kick off? Well, in the meantime, I don't see anyone typing. Kathy, your trajectory was rather organic, and like you said at the wrap of your talk, that it wasn't necessarily strategic, but it was truly heartfelt. How, I guess, in reflecting on your 20-year experience in East Harlem, what might you say were the qualities or practices that you shared that fostered this culture of trust with a community that is not easy to get traction to? East Harlem is not an easy nut to crack. Do you want to share with?
Let's see. As I said, so much of it was not strategic. It's kind of hard to think back, but I think I did emphasize in my presentation, or state at any rate, that it's important to be there. You can't expect to do community outreach unless you're willing to be on the ground and to go out to community events and just be present so that people get to know you. You can't expect people to come to you. You really have to go to them.
Absolutely. It's a two-way conversation, and I find that often if we take the initiative to visit them and their location, especially with the local population, that just kind of bodes well. But as your relationship deepened, were there any internal conversations, from the directors, like that you're doing too much or that the community was asking too much from you? I think that sometimes, when we open a box and there's an issue of accountability, how do we draw those parameters of what we can and cannot do given the institutions we represent?
I'm not sure if this is exactly an answer, but I had I was at the museum for so long. I had many titles, and I remember how I got the title Director of Government and Community Relations because I attended the unveiling of the honorary street name for East 106th Street, Julia de Boulevard, and there must have been a photograph in a local newspaper, and I was in it along with a local council person, senator, assembly person, and when the director of the museum saw that, she said, "You're doing government relations." And so not only did I have community in my title for a while, I think it was a year and a half, but I also had government in my title. I think that by and large the museum was very supportive because there is a responsibility for a museum to engage in its community, in its many communities, and in particular its community, its geographic neighborhood. And I candidly filled that bill for quite some time. I wasn't alone. It was not my idea for the museum to institute an I'm a neighbor policy, but it's done, at least, say, about 12, 13 years ago, so that if you live, work, or go to school in East Harlem, you are admitted to the museum for free without being asked for a suggested contribution, and also can go to programs for the members' price. So I think that's important to point out that it wasn't just me.
No, absolutely. I remember that clearly. And Juana, again, just to reinforce, your talk was very illuminating. Again, please, I guess, reaffirm or recap again how you managed to maintain your traction and your trust with your core constituency in Pilsen while you're managing this growth. I know that you're committed to serving your core populations.
I think that for me, and certainly I've had successful instances, and I've had some pretty negative circumstances as well. It's to what Kathy's saying, who is this outsider going into this community with their grand ideas. Because these communities have been overplanned, overpromised, and pretty much left in the lurch to just deal with their own issues on their own. So when you go into a community with so many broken promises, when you have a community that no one is paying attention to or forgotten, and even their own political representative or community who are always running for office do not push agendas for their own communities, then it becomes even harder for an outsider to come in and say, we've got this great idea, I want to do this collaboration and all that. And so you have to be prepared for that negative feedback, and you have to go on a listening tour. You have to introduce yourself without, having any agenda, without having any conversation about what your ideas. You can't go in there with your ideas. If you want to help a community, you have to figure what they want, because that's how you mobilize. And they're feeling, then when they feel that this is something so important to them that they're with you to make that happen. And that's the key, is to identify what's important to them. Is to approach this in the most respectful manner, and understanding that it's got to be with many voices in the community. It cannot just be led by the person who's spearheading it, make this happen, because it doesn't work and it won't sustain itself. And to really be respectful of identity, the language you use, how you describe that community, how they want to be described, be profiled, and all the things that are important to them, who should be at the table, and to do your homework about that community, to find out who really are the players, and to understand that there's also the good, the bad, and the ugly when dealing with communities. You're dealing with people who are very dedicated to communities, and you have people who are very self-serving. You have people who don't want to work together, fight or something like that, or they're in competition. And so those are the things that you have to really sift through and find the right people to be at that table, and knowing that not everybody is able to be at that table. And secondly, once you determine what is it that community feels that based on what you can provide and the resources you have, are in mobilizing and creating a real partnership. Can you convince a nonprofit organization in the community to have a certain percentage of their staff dedicated to that project? To help you, broker some relationships with people there by inviting them and having coffee or whatever at their place to make that introduction. And then that is going to work bottoms up and creating a plan, a real viable, reasonable can be financed and carried out. And also to be very clear about the commitment that once it is agreed upon that this is a project that they want to take on or participate in, what piece be responsible for, because it's shared responsibility. It's not you taking on all the elements of it, but rather how do you distribute the responsibilities of care from beginning to end, that there's a timeline from beginning to end, and that this is the expectations. And so they end the outcome, they understand the amount of money it's available, they understand what is coming to resources, so that that's all clear. And then you have an agreement signed. You get them sign an agreement, say, I agree to do this for this amount of time, and then you have that expectations, and you have a liaison to the community that ends up being that person that helps you navigate. And that's how I did it.
Absolutely, and that is a great way. And we are so fortunate, if not blessed, by the humanities folks, our wonderful librarians that think deeply about this work. They want to do it the right way, and they do want to do it holistically, and sincerely care about history, voice, agency. They're all doing work emanating from the Latino Americans 500 documentary series, and are forging partners doing oral histories. They're having local celebrations, and for some it's catalytic organizations. This is part of their long-range planning. I want to thank all of the 31 attendees, Juana Guzman, Kathleen Benson, our stars, our wonderful supportive staff at the ALA. Unless anyone has burning questions, we will sign off because we are at the 3 o'clock hour. Also be on file for you, and please feel free to share it with your partners and scholars. Again, I am very eager to speak with you, and no question if you have a question like, should I put Spanish in my flyer, to how do I recap? I don't know that they were as successful as I envisioned them in my final report. That is what I am here for. So use me while I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Juana, everyone.
Oh, no, thank you, guys. It's been terrific.